angst in the soldiers. There was also a lot of people who were quite badly wounded, and at some point of time, the leaders were supposed to come forward and talk about these things. And overall, what happened was, just give me a second. Overall, what happened was that on this day, there were two distinguished gentlemen who were supposed to talk, and this is the world looking at them in those days. The first one was a very erudite senator called Mr. Everett, and Mr. Everett was the main speaker of the day. But they had also invited another speaker who was the President of the United States, and that was Abraham Lincoln. And Abraham Lincoln was not very keen to speak, but then it was quite important day, and it was a memorial lecture kind of a day. So he said, okay, I'll give the vote of thanks, or he'll speak last. That's what I think literature talks about. Now, after about more than 150 years of this particular day, none of us remember what this erudite gentleman, Mr. Everett, spoke. He spoke for about 2.5 hours. And Abraham Lincoln actually spoke for just about 2 minutes. And his speech is called the famous Gettysburg Address that we all look up on public speaking. In fact, when you Google public speaking, I won't be surprised you'll probably get Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address as probably the world's best public speech. Now, probably that could be the reason that most of the communication research happens to be very American. I would probably call Indian speakers like Gandhi and Vallabhbhai Patel and Atal Bihari Vajpayee also in those leagues who have changed history. But probably many of our research comes from Western world, so that's why we look at Abraham Lincoln's speech as a very good example. Now, this is where I started thinking that how did this happen? Here are two amazingly erudite and wonderful orators. They spoke in front of the same audience in pretty much the same time, about 3 hours that was there, but they had a amazing different impact on the audiences. So that's where I started to research this topic, that looks like some speakers do a better job, and then it's very complicated to quantify or understand why some speakers are very good. So this is how my journey of research started, and the next slide will show you this question a little bit deeper, that I spent the last 5 years on this question, that why is Lincoln's speech more memorable than Everett's? And I don't have any disrespect to Mr. Everett. I'm sure he's a wonderful person. But if you look at our current generation today, I won't be surprised that many of us don't even remember who he is. That's what happens in public speaking. Some of the speakers do manage to get our mind share. So there is some interesting phenomena worth studying, which is what I started to work on. And I translated that to a little bit more broad-based question, that why are some speakers more impactful than others? And on this slide, you will see 4 people. One is my favorite, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. I've read his books and his letters, and he's a wonderful writer. He was not a great orator, but I think one thing I liked about him was that I've heard some of his recordings, and they were not in English. They were sometimes in Hindi or Gujarati. So he used vernacular language a lot. The second picture you see just adjacent to Mahatma Gandhi is a lady called Susan Cain. And I'll talk about her TED Talk, and her TED Talk has been watched by millions of people. And overall, she has been able to produce a tremendous impact on the world. Below her is Indra Nooyi, CEO of a company where there has been no female CEO, and she's quite a good orator and a listener. I mean, a speaker. I've heard one of her speeches, and it was quite interesting. And of course, Barack Obama, who probably today I would call as a very good orator. Not only an orator, I think he's a wonderful communicator. Even his The way he looks at press conferences and responds to people is very, very charismatic. So there are lots and lots of such examples, but in the interest of time, I'm going to narrow it down to few such examples and give you a deep dive. Slide number 6. Look at these pictures. Here's Mahatma Gandhi talking in front of a large gathering, and look at Martin Luther King, again looking at a very large audience. The point I would like you to think through is that it must be a hot day. They may have other things to do, but they all come and listen to them. So there must be something interesting going on in the minds of the followers and the relationship between these speakers when they want to listen. I'll give you an example of my own life. I mean, I was the head of IIMB alumni office, and we used to do lots of events, and we used to call great speakers. But it was hard to bring people in that room because everybody is busy, everybody's got their own life. But when I look at these pictures, I always wonder that what was happening in those days which made people come from far and wide to listen and be with them. So the concept that we now are moving into is called leadership. And leadership has been there for centuries. It has become a little bit more fancy word thanks to management education. But I think the examples of leadership has been around. But the reason I put these two pictures is most of us focus on the leaders, which is Gandhi and King. But I want you to stop focus on these leaders. I want you to focus on the people. I think if we start researching, if you start researching what is happening in the minds of these speakers or the listeners, I think you'll get some fascinating ideas. I'll pause here because there's one of the participants who has messaged me that my voice is fading. Is everybody else experiencing the same, or is my voice okay? And you can respond to me in a private message. Okay, some of you are responding that it's clear. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, good. So I think the person who wrote to me, probably you might want to check your headphone. I think other participants are finding it quite clear. So I'll move on to slide number 7. Here's why I think it's important for us to study this topic. If you look at academic research on public speaking, most of it is focused on political leadership. That's the reason we go back to Gandhi, King, and in today's term, I won't be surprised that Narendra Modi's name comes probably on the top name when it comes to public speaking and oratory. So political leadership has been pretty much the most important way of understanding this topic. But this is where I disagree a lot, that I'm in a business school, my students are business students, all of us on this webinar are probably voters, so we are connected to politics, but I don't think we really do work in politics. We do work in a corporate and a business setting. And my question has been with academics that why aren't we studying business leaders? And the answer given to me by some books was that business leadership studies are just about 40 to 50 years old. And the world is changing. So I think now the time has come for us to look at business a little bit more seriously. And industrial revolution is just about 300 years old. So we're looking at a very new phenomena. That industrial revolution, though it started 300 years ago, the collaboration of the world started just about 60 to 70 years ago, out of which about 30 to 40 years is when the technology has started evolving. So the world is shrinking. And now probably it's a good time to look at communication and public speaking from a business perspective, because my study tells me and my research tells me that you can't use political examples in a business context because both are very, very different. Second, communication studies are heavily drawn from English studies, and most of you on this webinar would appreciate this. Like I would tell you my own story. I come from a school where all the books were Hindi. So we had to translate them in English. Now I was lucky to have good teachers and probably a society or a environment where I could speak a little bit in English. But I know many of my friends in engineering could not even speak in English, so they had a very tough time. They came from vernacular mediums, and I now am in Bangalore, and I know many of my students are from either Kannada or Tamil mediums. So I think there is a big problem in our education system that we look at everything from an English medium perspective. And communication is not just English. Communication happens in lots and lots of languages. Sometimes people don't even speak. They use sign gestures and facial expressions to speak. So it's not just grammar or English. And many of us would have been made to go through a communication skill training by an English professor. And the focus of an English professor would be to check grammar. But I think the business world that we live in, grammar has pretty much taken a backseat. In fact, I know many business leaders who have very poor grammar and very poor diction of English, but still are charismatic leaders because it is much more than English. So that was the second problem that I thought I would share with you, that communication is not English. Communication is a very big word, and I think it's almost like life. To survive in life, we probably need hundreds of skills, and English is one of them. We still can survive without English. And the same thing happens in public speaking, that you can be a great public speaker even though if you don't know good English. The third is, I think communication is going through a revolution. Thanks to social media, thanks to the way we are sharing information on this world, thanks to the way people are commenting on each other's thoughts and views. Now, majority of it is also quite bad because the comments are not really comments, they're mostly fights. But nevertheless, for an academic researcher like me, it is delicious research and data points that I would love to keep working on. So this new world is changing the dynamics of academic subjects, and communication is probably the most severely impacted, which is why we need to study this subject all over again. Slide number 8. These are the challenges that inspired me to work on this topic. First of all, there is no benchmark in Indian education system on communication. There is no benchmark in Indian corporate system also. I worked for 3 companies, and none of these companies, and I can bet my paycheck, none of the other companies would even have an answer of what does good communication mean. So there is no benchmark. Everything is copied from the West. Our students, including me, are afraid to speak up. This is a very big problem in our country. We have a fear of standing up and speaking. We have serious self-esteem issues. We sometimes have inferiority complex. We are not sure how to even speak up or think. So it's a new subject for us at the age of 20x or 30x. So I think even I was very scared when I went to the corporate world, and I still am quite nervous when I speak up. So this subject is not just about skills, it's also about confidence. There are cultural issues where we are not encouraged to learn subjects which are soft skills. We pretty much gravitate towards hard skills. The writing on the wall is very clear. If you want to be successful, better learn to speak up. And this is not just me speaking. If you look at all the top surveys of recruiters in the world today, I won't be surprised that oral communication and written communication will be in the top 5 skills that they need from everyone on this webinar. Now, having said that, public speaking is one of that essential skill where everybody gauges your communication. So that's why public speaking is probably the toughest, but also happens to be the most important skill of all the above. And there is enough evidence in the world to link leadership and communication, but it is not visible in India. Many of our corporate managers and CEOs are bad communicators, but they still are managers and CEOs. But in the rest of the world, I think that equation has changed. That if you're a good communicator, there's a good chance that you'll rise up. And that change is slowly visible in an Indian system as well. It will take some time, but I think we are getting there. Slide number 9, here is the benefit of being in the modern technological side and if you're doing academic research. There are platforms like TED.com, and there are many more like Pecha Kucha. Then there is YouTube, where you will find videos of great speeches. And not only videos, you will find the texts of these speeches. You will find the views of audience and even comments of the audience. And thanks to new methods of qualitative research, if you are a researcher, I think this subject is worth looking at for your PhD program. Slide number 10. This is where I'm now going to tell you the summary um, of uh, of this research that I talked about, which is also there in my book. I think the overall aha moment for me in my research came where I also started like any other communication researcher. I looked at the communication theory. Communication theory is very simple. There is a sender, there is a receiver, then there are some channels, and there are some challenges between them like obstacles, and there are some cues, and all of this combined make the communication theory, which explains how people talk to each other, how they greet each other. And when you look at public speaking from this particular theory, it does not give any answer. Like, for example, what made Susan Cain's TED Talk get 30 plus million views? This theory completely falls flat because just like Susan Cain, there are thousands of other TED Talkers. I mean, if I make my TED video, I'm communicating, I'm speaking English, I can get across my message very well, but somehow I won't get viewers because there is something missing that the communication theory is not able to resolve. So I started digging deeper, and I found the answer in the second theory, that there are some theories called persuasion, and persuasion is like a communication theory, but it is almost like, imagine you have a gun and the bullets are persuasion. So if you have to change the world, you need a gun. Communication theory is one bullet, and the persuasion theory is a little bigger and more intense bullet to change people. Now, persuasion theory is very interesting. If I have to bring a change in the world, I have to say something, and that message is very persuasive. And this theory did answer why Susan Cain's TED Talk is so popular. But then, like Susan Cain, there were many other more persuasive speakers, and their messages did not go through. And that's where the last theory kind of connected with the problem, that there is another theory called the charismatic leadership theory. And this theory states that when the speaker is speaking to the audience have reached a plane where they are inspired and motivated, and their self-esteem increases just because of the words of the speaker. And when you combine these three theories together, you start to see an amazing answer on why some speakers are very good and some are not that good, despite being the fact that their education is the same, audience is the same, and all these things that you can work on. So if you look at this toy image that I have put on this slide, this is a kaleidoscope. And when we were children, I remember when my dad took me to a festival. This was, I think, somewhere in the holy time. And there were these village fairs. And I come from a small town, so my father would take me there. And in these small town fairs, you would get these toys. One of them was this kaleidoscope. It's a very interesting toy. It has three mirrors inside and some broken pieces of glass. So when you look through that eyepiece on one end, you'll see some beautiful patterns. And because there are three glasses, I was inspired to call my research as a kaleidoscope, that there are three theories. Individually, they're just pieces of just mirrors. But when you put them together in an interesting angle, then they can bring out wonderful patterns. And the key is to look at a speaker from these three particular theories. And that's what I have mentioned in slide number 11. That the first theory, which is the communication theory, just shares information. The persuasion theory is about changing and bringing a change in people. And the last is the leadership theory is about leading people. So when you start looking at the problems using these three lenses, you will find some very interesting patterns which are on slide number 12. That Communication view helps us share ideas or words or messages or information. The persuasion view brings a change in the listener, and the charismatic view builds self-esteem and motivation levels of followers. I think this is getting a little too theoretical. I'm going to explain it with a simple example. How many of you on this webinar in the last 2 or 3 days watched a wonderful, actually, wonderful is an understatement, absolutely mind-blowing video from this group of people called AIB. They're on YouTube. And please chat with me if you have watched this. How many of you have watched this AIB video on engineering colleges? There was a video where this guy literally shouts at the recruiter on communication and English. Did you all get to see that? It was circulating in Facebook and many social medias. And if you have not watched it, please Google it right now. I think it's a brilliant video. And the second such example is if you have watched, let's say, any TED Talk, and I'm going to talk about TED Talks, there are some TED Talks that really are very good. And that is example number 2. Now let me give you some more common examples. Have you all watched this movie called Chak De, which is Shah Rukh Khan movie? And do you remember this scene in the last where these girls are kind of almost losing, and then Shah Rukh Khan gives them this speech, 70 minute, which is 70 minutes. I think it's in the last part of the movie. It's their final match, and Shah Rukh Khan gives this amazing speech, which is the 70 minute, 70 minute, and you can live your life. I think those speeches are my interest. That what is it that Shah Rukh Khan, by the way, Shah Rukh Khan is a great speaker as well, and we invited him in IIM Bangalore. He's a charming speaker, and he writes his thoughts down. So there is something he does that I need to learn, and my academic theory is this kaleidoscope kind of answer that particular pattern. That one is that Chak De's speech has basic communication, sharing message. He's sharing with the girls that this is your moment, go and live it and go play your best. So that is level number 1. Level number 2 is the status of girls to improve in Indian hockey. You better go and win. And there is this emotional persuasive message that he gives to the girls. And the final is that the girls not only relate to him but are inspired and motivated by Shah Rukh Khan, and that happens only when their minds reach a level of frequency where Shah Rukh Khan's frequency and their frequency are almost similar. And this feeling is the key. And when we were children or when we are in the corporate world, there are some people, when they speak, we actually feel goosebumps in our body. Haven't you experienced that? That there are certain speeches that make you feel really good and you feel that it was a rebirth. And that is that third plane, which is called self-esteem and motivational level. So what people like Shah Rukh Khan and Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King and Susan Cain and nowadays Narendra Modi, what they do is they do all of this. They in fact plan a speech which has these 3 theories working very well. And when you look at their words and their actions using this kaleidoscope, you will see what I mean, that on the followers, the impact is absolutely brilliant. And let's move to slide number 13. And this is the time where I would encourage you to start asking questions. You can send me a question on the chat and I'll start responding them as quickly as I can. Now here is slide number 13 and Ken Richardson's TED Talk. This TED Talk has the largest views. Now let me tell you, before I saw this video, I didn't even know who Ken Richardson is from Adam. That means when the credibility of the speaker is not known, how come he still was able to make an impact on me? So that was the question I started with. And I watched his video. His video is not very easy to understand. If you have lived in or worked with British people, he has a British humor, very witty, very sly. So if you don't understand his jokes, it might be a very boring speech for you. But if you do understand his jokes, I think you might be laughing on the floor. But somewhere thank you. One participant has corrected me. It is Ken Robinson, not Ken Richardson. Thank you, Parthasarthi. That was a great input. So Ken Robinson TED Talk is very funny, but yet somewhere in his talk, he is extremely motivational. He actually gives a logic, and he says that our education system is broken. And all of us, probably in the entire world, would agree with this. I haven't met a single person who says that our education system is absolutely picture perfect. Everybody says that it is completely screwed up and we need to do something about it. And his message hits a home run. And that's the power of his not only words and communication, but his persuasiveness and his charismatic leadership. And at the end of his talk, you feel inspired and motivated because he behaves as if he's like you. And this ability for a leader to connect with the follower, where you feel that this person is like me, is the third element, which is what even Narendra Modi does. In fact, a lot of people who listen to Narendra Modi feel that sometimes I feel that I'm just like him or he's just like me. And that's the beauty of leadership that comes out in communication that many of us don't really think about. I'll give you a slightly different parallel. Many of us make business presentations in offices. Actually, business presentations are public speaking opportunities. But I can bet you all of you would be either bored by those presentations or probably not trying hard, but you're missing your entire opportunity just because either you're afraid or probably don't know. But if you begin to work on this subject, I think you'll not only communicate your messages, but you'll also inspire people. And I can tell you that research says that those speakers who not only speak well, but also bring a change and inspire people are the leaders of the future. So please take this subject very seriously, and not just from business presentation perspective, but the way of life perspective. Slide number 14. This is the final part of my research, that many of the researchers are focused on the speaker. But I took a different view. I went in the minds of the follower and I started reading what they are thinking. Followers are like customers walking in a buffet. And many of you would have gone in a buffet. Buffet, there is lots of food. There is the chart counter on one side, and there is vegetarian, then there is desserts, and there is non-vegetarian. Some people just go for biryani. Some people will just go for charts. So all of us are different. Some people want 40 things, some people want only 2 things. Then somebody will say that, hey, there was no curd rice in the end and I didn't like the buffet. So despite the fact that there are 40 things in the buffet and there are many of us, no two people will rate the buffet in the same way. In fact, when you look at buffet and you look at the plates of people, you'll find that every plate is very different. Somebody has more chaat, somebody has more dessert, somebody has more biryani. So this is what I think we should understand, that I think if you want to master communication, you must understand the view of followers, and followers react to speakers very, very differently. So what works for a follower in a speech, which is on slide number 15, if you look at this diagram, it's very complicated, and that's exactly what I wanted to tell you. That the theories, these 3 theories that I talked about, say that there are more than 50 parameters that impact the follower. Not 1, not 2, not 10, not 20, but 50. Now that's a lot of permutation combinations, probably billions and trillions kind of permutation combination on a follower. Which is why if there are 7 billion people on this planet, 7 billion people will react very differently to your communication. And these parameters can vary from person to person. In fact, it is so complicated that the same person, if he listens to your speech in the morning, will react very differently if he hears your speech in the afternoon. If he has not had a good lunch and he is hungry, I don't think he'll listen to you. Or if he is looking at his WhatsApp and his girlfriend is about to send a message and he's waiting for that, I don't think he'll listen to you. So the parameters change and they're always interplaying with each other. The third point is very important. These 50 parameters interplay together to make an impact. It's not that just one of this makes an impact. There could be 5, 10, maybe 20, maybe 30, and nobody knows the exact answer, but they interplay together to make an impact on the audiences. Slide 16, I think this is where leaders spend a lot of time. They really understand the audiences. They look at how they are building their beliefs and attitudes, and at some point of time they change their behaviors, and that's what public speaking really does. Slide 17, final part, and then I'll open up to questions, and I'll be happy to take your questions. There are one or two who have sent some comments, but I would love if you can ask me some questions. The three qualities, these qualities can be bucketed into three big areas. So what are these buckets? The first is, what are the qualities of the speaker? The second is the qualities of the message. And the third is the qualities of the listener. I'm sorry, there's a spelling mistake in this slide. Point number 2 is the qualities of the listener, and the third is qualities of the message. And if you look at the next slide, which is slide number 18, here is a snapshot of each of this. I didn't have space to put all these 50 parameters, so I'm giving you just a snapshot. Take a look at this slide. Let's take a look at the first one, which is the quality of the speaker. The way the speaker communicates the confidence. I'll give you a simple example. Haven't you noticed that some people walk with confidence? Their chest is out, their hands are a little bit away, their neck is a little bit up. And many of us walk with, shoulders drooping, as if we want to hide somewhere. And many of us would relate to this feeling that when we enter a room with people watching us, many of us want to run on the back bench. But many of us come in the front and take the stage, and those people are the confident people. So confidence, energy, belief and sincerity in the topic, the tone, how you speak it, how you raise your voice, so on and so forth, and then go down to the way your track record and credibility is about. To give you an example, that you might be speaking on a topic which is very close to your heart. For example, your topic is that take more risks, and you're giving a speech to your audiences. But if the audiences feel that you yourself have not taken risk, then they will doubt your credibility. It's like telling others to go and jump and swim when you yourself don't know how to swim. So the audiences are gauging you, the audiences are judging you at every second, and if you don't measure up to them, then they will not listen to you. So these are the qualities of a speaker. Second table, qualities of the message. Messages have lots of qualities. Some messages are very direct, some are very indirect. Some are person-centered and some are very goal-centered. The way you structure a message, like how would you do the opening, how do you do the body, how do you do the conclusion, where does the argument come, does the argument come in the beginning or the end, where is the evidence come, will you keep the evidence towards the last and keep building the suspense, or will you straight away give the evidence and open up the case? Will you make people afraid or will you make them guilty? I'll give you an example of how fear appeal and guilt appeal works. Many of the advertisements that you see in modern television use these fear appeals and guilt appeals. For example, if you eat too much of sugar, you'll get diabetes. So switch to low sweetened, I don't know, maybe a gulab jamun, and the product they're selling is this artificial sweetener. In fact, there is an ad like that with this famous chef called Sanjeev Kapoor says कि जितना जी चाहे दाल का हलवा खाओ लेकिन have this low quality or low sugar which will not give you diabetes. So he's connecting to you on fear. And then there is one more ad which is a girl very hungry, but she doesn't want to eat a samosa because she feels guilty कि मेरा weight बढ़ जाएगा. So the ad says that why don't you have this Britannia multigrain biscuit because it will not increase your weight. So guilt appeal and fear appeals are heavily used in advertising. In fact, heavily used in the corporate world also. To give you a simple example, the most famous example of fear appeal is do your work, otherwise you will not get a promotion. Come to office early, otherwise you'll get a warning. finish your emails on time, otherwise we'll give you a stern warning. So fear appeals and guilt appeals are very commonly used in education system and corporate system, but good leaders do it differently and they use them to change their minds. The last table is the recipient. I think this is where many of us don't do our homework, and I would request you to first look at this table next time when you are making a presentation. You know, the audience is very bored. They're like you and me on this webinar. It is 7:45. Everybody must be hungry. And if you don't give them something that they can enjoy, then they'll walk away. So their maturity, their involvement, their interpersonal cognitive complexity, which means what is the level of depth their brains can understand, their personalities, their inclination towards the topic, their attraction towards your work, the choice of medium, and all these things are commonly done. So these are just snapshots, and there are 50 such things that work together. So at this point of time, I'll take one or two questions that you are asking me and explain them further. One of the participants has asked a question that he does a lot of business presentations, so there is no lack of practice or opportunities. He also practices at home, but somehow there is no impact. And many times his flow of thoughts get held up when I'm on stage. So how does one overcome these limitations? I think it's a great question. Here are some tips for you. The first thing you should do is please practice speech writing. Speech writing means that you write your speech down. And if you Google on my LinkedIn profile, there is a blog I've written on speech writing. I think many of us in the corporate world, what do? We make a PPT first and then talk on that. That's actually very wrong. What you should do is first write down your entire speech and then keep it with you, practice it, and then make PPTs. And when you go and deliver these presentations, take your notes with you. I encourage you to take your diary or your notes and keep it open. In fact, I find speakers who are prepared more better than speakers who are not prepared. I mean, I would agree to a person who has diary full of notes rather than a person who's just speaking up without any preparation. So please take notes, please practice a little bit. It is okay to memorize and not remember, but when you don't remember on stage, don't worry. Just say, I'm sorry, refer to your notes and move on. See, we are human beings. We're not supposed to be machines. And human beings are capable of making mistakes when we are in front of an audience. If you look at news presenters, they forget. If you look at many orators, they forget. And it is absolutely okay to stop your speech when you have forgotten something, apologize, and pick up where you left by referring to your notes. In fact, one of the singers called Patti Smith forgot her songs and made a mistake. She was nervous and she apologized. And this was a Nobel Prize ceremony for Bob Dylan. And the audience clapped for her. So please remember two things. One is, don't expect yourself to remember everything. Actually, you can't. Take your notes and do speech writing. Instead of making PPTs, you write your entire speech down. So that's my request to you for that question. One more participant has asked another question, that how do you bring persuasion in your message? Are there any to-dos? Is it more to do with the quality of the recipient? I think absolutely. You have to. I'll answer this question with my favorite topic called food. My students would know this. And see, when you invite somebody to your house, and if you don't know what that person eats, I think it's going to be a disaster. So let's say you invite me and you have made this awesome butter chicken, but I'm a vegetarian, so your butter chicken failed. Now let's say you got to know that I'm a vegetarian and you made this amazing dish which has peanuts in it, and I tell you that I'm allergic to peanuts. So again it failed. So I think audience analysis is probably the most important. Now here is 2 or 3 tips I can give you right now. This gentleman who's asked this question, you can message me privately. I'm sure you work for a big company, right? Now you and all your audiences are there in that company for one reason. And that reason is very simple. Everybody wants to be more successful in their careers. They want to make more money. They want to have a better quality of life. They don't want to listen to boring presentations because everybody's got enough presentations and everybody's got a busy life. So can you give them a presentation or a message which is very short? That is number one. Second, it has amazing logic in it. See, you work in a company which believes in logical thinking. That's what we teach in business schools. Can you give some examples that are spot on to your topic? So give you an example that let's say you want $5 million from your boss. You have this big problem and this problem has to be solved. The customers are screaming on your back, but you need $5 million. So can you just go to your boss and persuade him using logic, which is, hey, I need 5 million, but if you give me 5 million, I'm going to give you 500 million back. So that's some logical thinking. Second, some benefit to your boss. Your boss is coming to the company not because he loves the company. I think he comes to the company because he wants to live a better life. He wants to be more successful. Can you help him become more successful? That, hey, Mr. Boss, if you give me 5 million, I think you're going to get your new promotion. So maybe that could be an idea. And third, sometimes make people laugh. Many of us, and I was in the corporate world, and so are you, our meetings are so boring. Nobody laughs. If somebody laughs, it is considered to be like a strict no-no. Jokes are never cracked. And the jokes that are cracked are absolutely sometimes hinting on racism. So can you think of some emotions like laughter, smile, a story? And storytelling is a very powerful element of persuasion. So to give you a question answer in the question that you asked, there are at least 14 or 15 methods of persuasion. And if you read my book, the entire chapter on persuasion is there for you. Start with two things, logic and story. I think you will make better messages for your audiences because story will make them smile and the story have very good logic in it, so you might get your $5 million in just 2 minutes. You don't have to work too hard. So these are the two questions that came to me just now. We have 10 more minutes and I can take few more questions. All right, here's one more. This listener has asked a question that from her experience, the PowerPoint presentations with more visuals and less text have high impact. Slides with text skills kills people's attention and don't fly with the audience. Your view. So I think it depends on the audience. There are three kinds of PPTs or prezis or documents. The first one is called a visual presentation, which is very visual, has less text, and now those presentations work very similar to product launches. And if you remember, have you seen Steve Jobs' launch videos and his slides are like just pictures? Now, when you're looking at that kind of a presentation, I think pictures work a lot better. But then when you are in the corporate world and are doing training programs, then I think a lot of words are important too, because your slides are not just slides, they're actually documents that are emailed to people, they read it, they come prepared, hopefully. And that's where bulleted text is a little bit helpful. So I don't think there is one answer to this question. And my request is, if you look at my slides, I always put one picture and some text. So that's how I make my slides interesting. But I completely agree with you. If your slides don't have pictures, the audience attention drops. Now, if you want to do a training program, you can do a picture and then this next slide can be full of words, and that way you can balance it out. But please remember, many of you are working for companies where slides are emailed and put on SharePoints and people read them. So you must have some data or text so that they understand what they have to do. Just having pictures may not be very helpful. But when you are giving like a TED talk, then I think a slide deck with many pictures is better because nobody's going to read your slides. And my request to you is, you are the presentation, not your slides. I tell this to all my students. If there is one thing you want to take away from my talk today, please don't make your slides as a presentation. The presentation is you. You have to stand in the front and you have to win your audiences. But if your slides are there, then you need not come there. You can just email your slides and must not waste your time. So that's the answer to your question. Next participant has asked a question. Can you suggest some good books on storytelling techniques? Maybe you can send it to us later. Sure, I will send you, all of you will get a list of books from me. The top two books are my own, so please do read them. But I will send you some good books on storytelling. In fact, I can give you a name right now. The curator of TED.com, Chris Anderson, has written a very nice book. You can start with that after you've read my book, that is. So, and I'll send you some more books later. One participant has written a question that key messages are looked into the PPT at the bottom. Do you have any effective way of creating this? So here's what I do. What I do is that in the slide where there is a key message, I make a call out. Do you know what call outs are? If you go to PPT or a MS Word or a PDF, there are some shapes and callouts, and these callouts are like boxes with some lines. So I make my pointer point to a particular area of the slide, and I take a callout and I color it with the most jazzy blue or a red or something like that. So those are my ways of putting a key message, but your question is well taken, that all of us should practice a slide which has a key message, and they could be at the bottom, but I encourage you to bring it on the top and use a call out with colors. Actually, colors can be used very effectively in your slides, and many of you will have companies which have templates, so you can use them to make a little bit better. So one participant has asked again, what's the name of the book? I'll show you in a slide right now. In fact, that's the slide I'm putting on right now, which is called, this is the link to my book. And the other book I talked about was Chris Anderson book on how to convince somebody with your idea. I don't remember the name of that book, but I think it is by Chris Anderson, and he is the curator of TED. So if you go to TED.com, that book will be hosted right on the top. I think you can start with that. There is one more presenter who has asked a question that why Lincoln's 2 minutes were more effective. Was it the content or the way he connected to the audience? So I just spoke on this phenomena for about 20-30 minutes, but here's my take on it. Lincoln's 2-minute speech had those three areas that I talked about. One, the words were very simple to understand. At that time, the words hit a home run. Two, they changed an audience. See, if you look at the audience at that time, they wanted to be healed. If you remember, this was a war that was going on. What do people who have witnessed a war want? I think they want peace. And Lincoln gave them peace in those 2 minutes, which Everett could not. In fact, Everett gave a sermon. And I'll give you example of these motivational talks. When we all come to office, there are people who nowadays send these short messages. There is no I in Teams. Teams are like built with all of us, and there is no I in Teams. Now this is a great message, but sometimes it irritates me that I don't need that at that point of time. So I think Lincoln was a person who gave peace in those 2 minutes and gave a future of a country. And if you look at academic research on Lincoln's speeches, he raised the self-esteem of Americans. He gave them a future which they could build that country on. So that's my view. And if you read my book, the entire 6th chapter explains Lincoln's Gettysburg Address a lot more in detail. One more question. What should be the right duration of any presentation or talk? Today the attention span is few minutes. I agree with you. Actually, it's not just few minutes, it's few seconds. Research nowadays says that the attention span is about 3 seconds, 3 to 5, because either your cell phone will ring or your WhatsApp will buzz, or you will suddenly get an interrupt in your brain that, oh God, I have to send this email, or you have to pick up your kids or pay a bill. So we are all a distracted community of 7 billion people. So the attention span is very, very less. I would encourage you to read my book, which is called What to Say When to Shut Up. where I talk about how do you keep the attention of the audiences very high, and there is a 6-step framework called AEIOU that you should figure that out. But the duration of a talk or a presentation, there is a simple mathematics that I would probably give you. Let's say you have 10 minutes slotted for you. I would probably say that you should finish a presentation in about 7, actually 5. You should gift the audience some time back. You know, the audience loves a speaker who comes and announces that, you know what, I have 10 minutes, but I'll free you up in 5. I bet you your presentation is a winner right there. Now, the problem is they give us 10 minutes and we take 20, and that's where people hate us. So, please be sensitive to the time of people, give them something short and quick, and don't beat around the bush. If you want, let's say $5 million, the first sentence should be that I want $5 million. Here's what I'll give you back. And if it gets finished in 1 or 2 minutes, I think you're done. The last question, that's a personal question, but what kind of teaching I do? I teach at IIMB Bangalore, and I teach pretty much from term 1 to term 6, and I do many executive education programs as well. I call myself a teacher on hire. So wherever there's a classroom, I go, and right now all my classrooms happen to be in IIM Bangalore, and I also teach in IIM Udaipur and IIM Trichy and Vishakhapatnam. They are institutes that are connected with Bangalore, so our ex-professors are there, and I know them, and they are kind enough to invite me. So this was pretty much what I had. It's 8 o'clock, and last call for one last question. If not, then thank you very much. I think you've all been a wonderful audience. If any of you is interested to continue this journey on communication skills, please write to me. My email ID is rakesh.godwani@imb.arnet.in. And I'm very keen to write cases for our country and Asian audiences. So if you have some problems where I could help you or you could collaborate with me, I'd be very grateful. So once again, thank you for giving your precious time on a Friday evening for my lecture. Thank you, IIMB Alumni Office and Link Street. And have a wonderful evening. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.